You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Annie Tyson. She runs Freelance Annie Paralegal Services. She's been doing this for over 16 years, particularly in family law. So I figured it'd be interesting to get her perspective. So welcome, Annie. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you've been doing family law or as a paralegal in family law for 16 plus years, long time.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a long time.
Well, what got you into it? What interested you in the beginning?
Honestly, I was a jet mechanic in the Air Force, and yeah, I know, completely different. But I met somebody who had kids and were dating, and everything seemed fine. And then I found out, by the way, he's not actually divorced. So we were actually in a different state, and the kids were in a really bad situation with mom, and so I kind of got involved with the process that way. Just kind of being the partner of somebody going through that. And then I thought, well, maybe I should go into this. And so I actually started volunteering at his attorney's office, and she just started training me on all the different things, and I kind of fell in love with it and decided that this is something I want to do. And so when my military commitment was up, I went full throttle. I just ended up being a paralegal, and now here I am.
Did you think about becoming an attorney, or you just thought paralegal?
No, I don't feel like so. One of the things I do have kind of an issue with is professional image. As far as being an attorney was concerned, I was looking at the kind of image you have to portray, and thought, yeah, that's not something I'm going to want to maintain. So, and I like, I like the behind the scenes stuff. I like writing a lot. And I noticed that the attorneys are typically, not in the office so much. They're handling clients. They're talking to people. They have big strengths in sales, which I don't think I have the greatest strength in sales. So, and then of course, they go in front of the judge and they talk to a bunch of people, and, the losses are really hard and the wins are really big. And, they're just, I don't know, being an attorney was not something that I ever really wanted to do. I kind of like the support staff, kind of like being a support staff, and as a mechanic, I wasn't the pilot, you know what I mean? So just kind of, it correlates a little bit that way, I think, too. So
yeah, that makes sense. So what are I've heard of legal secretaries, of course, there's admins, there's paralegals. Like, who are the creatures that are in a law firm besides the attorney that could help them?
Yeah, and it kind of just depends on the facet of law, and it kind of depends on the firm and the cases they handle. But for the most part, there's typically an intake person. There's a receptionist, somebody that gets the people in the door, schedules the consults and things like that. And then there are legal secretaries, and those people handle, certain types of. It just kind of depends. It's either legal assistants or legal secretaries that will handle a lot of the client communications. They'll handle the scheduling, some of the more simple pleadings, things like that. They'll do notices of hearing. They'll do all the setups for mediations, things like that. And then you have the paralegal, who typically does more of the substantive drafting work. And then they kind of put everything together, hand the attorney a briefcase. Here's your case, go. And then of course you have the attorney. You'll have an associate attorney, or you'll have a partner. But there's some places where they kind of interchange the legal assistant and the paralegal. Some people have a general practice where they have a receptionist and then one person that does everything, and then the attorney that's that does the attorney stuff. So it kind of depends. It kind of depends on where you're at, what the firm is doing.
Do a lot of paralegals stay with just one firm, or do they split up their time amongst a few firms?
No, for the most part, if you're going to engage with a firm, you stay with the firm, especially because the legal field's kind of small in most communities. There's just a pool of firms basically in that facet of law. So you can't necessarily work for all of them at the same time. It kind of becomes a conflict. But then there are people like me that end up, after they're done kind of working in firms, they go out and freelance. And that's a little different just because we're just contracting and drafting for whatever attorney needs help. So I think most people do it as a career. They stay with one firm, or they may switch up and go to different firms, but typically not at the same time.
Okay. The ones that you freelanced, what kind of projects do they have you in for?
So I specifically exclusively do family law. I've considered branching out a little bit, but you do what you know. I feel like I'm pretty good at it, so I just kind of stay in that lane. But typically they'll hire me to do, drafting for pleadings or motions. A lot of them will send me their orders. A lot of them will send me the kind of the harder stuff that they don't really want to spend a lot of time dealing with, especially if they're really busy. They got a lot of overflow. They got deadlines to meet, and so they'll be like, "Well, I don't want to deal with this order. This one's going to be a bear. It'll take me 2 weeks to get to. So let's just give it to her. She'll deal with it, and then I'll."
One of the documents you have to draft, are they like Mad Lib, where you fill in 5, 10? Where what makes a document complicated and long? Is it assembling the pieces of info that have to go into it, or is it? I guess you wouldn't do the legal strategizing, or maybe you would.
Yeah, in some cases I do. Obviously, I don't do that by myself. That's something that I collaborate with the attorney on, because I can't do things without the supervision. I don't have a bar card, but a lot. I have a friend of mine that actually hates lawyers. He hates the whole legal field. He thinks that it's over. They overcharge and everything is templated. And I'm like, okay, I kind of understand where they're coming from, because there are a lot of things in a lot of places that will do some template work, and I get that. And I call those boilerplate. But the difference, I think, between what I do and what a lot of these case mills do is, you may have a template that's kind of the basis. It's got some of the language that the court normally will see, like jurisdiction, or there's certain clauses that will go in there that pretty much same across the board. But every case has their own kind of little nuance. So we need to gather the information from that client's case, that client's perspective, given the information that we have about that specific client's history, and we take a lot of different things into account. So I like to think of drafting not just necessarily as, here's your order, you can live by it, but I also like to create them in such a way that it mitigates potential issues later. So I don't want to write something that's like, okay, this is fine, this will get, through the judge, that'll be fine, because if I don't write it a certain way, they may end up having trouble later with enforcing it, or they may have trouble later with third parties like title companies or something. So that's probably the hard part. The substantive stuff is taking all the facts that you have and putting them in such a way to get the result that you want, while also considering that what you write may have ramifications later if it's not written a certain way. So I think that's what kind of makes it complicated, the length of them, and it kind of just depends on the details of the case too.
In family law in particular, does the complication come in the beginning, or does it come later on once you're going back and forth with the other party? I know most of them don't end up in trials, but even so, does the legal work get more intense and more nuanced as you go, or is it the same the whole time?
No, I think it gets more difficult as it goes, and I think what a lot of people get kind of hung up on is at the very beginning, it's real hot and heavy. Like, everybody's emotions are crazy. Everybody's worried about what's the next step. It feels like a big scary lawsuit. Once you get kind of like a temporary thing in place, once the dust has settled a little bit, I think that's when you really start looking into stuff. The petition and the, he said, she said stuff, that start, but then you kind of start getting into the nitty gritty. And I think it's not just, the typical stuff you'll see with custody issues or possession and access. And, especially with divorces, you've got to look at a lot of different property aspects. And sometimes you begin with something, and as you're going, you're collecting information, you go, oh, actually, there's more to this. Or, oh, this person is entitled to this much more, and this is why we think that. And as things get longer, people typically start with the acknowledgement that they're under the microscope. Like, hey, I just started litigation, and so I know everybody's looking at me. But give it 6 months and people kind of stop. They kind of forget. And so they start that they're kind of under the microscope, like that what they do in their normal life is now going to be exposed, good, bad, or ugly. And so they kind of get complacent about it. So somebody that is one of those people that just drains bank accounts, for instance, they're going to kind of throttle off of that at the beginning. But towards the middle, like 6 to 8 months into it, they're going to kind of forget, hey, I'm in the middle of litigation, and that they're going to do what they typically do. And then it's like, okay, so we have this person that for right now, everything is kind of status quo, but 6 to 8 months into it, they start reverting back to draining accounts. And so now
So it's like a chess game, and you're waiting and playing and keeping your defenses up, and then you're waiting for the other person to screw up.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, that's typically how it works. If it doesn't, that's actually great. I honestly prefer, when I was working with firms, I kind of like the cases where everybody calmed down, settled, and kind of was just like, all right, let's get this over over. Let's see what's going to make both of us happy. And then you just put everything on paper and go, okay, well, what are the actual issues? Zone in on those, and then one by one, settle those issues and call it a day. So I kind of like those ones. I think people in general, they come back from that better. It's still a traumatic issue. So it's kind of like the easier that you can make it towards the end, the better it is on people, on their emotional health, their mental health, and things like that.
Yeah, when do people kind of they get tired and they can't take it anymore? What do you notice around that? When does it happen?
I would say probably, I would say right before mediation, which is interesting to me because that's kind of when you go in to try to settle the thing without having to go to trial. Right about then, after at least the first hearing, after we start talking about, let's go ahead and exchange all these documents, let's start getting into your, let's start getting invasive, then it's kind of, then that's just like the case, the procedure part. But I think a lot of people also start kind of giving up when it starts getting expensive, when the retainer fee is starting to get exhausted. And then it's kind of like, I don't want to pay another $5-10 or I don't have $5-10. Let's just get there.
What's in the beginning, so you have certain facts about the case, but I guess you don't really know the case. And even the people involved probably don't even know it until it's been going for, a number of months. But then if you're going to draft a document, let's say like 7 months in, do you have to go back and look over everything that's happened in the case in order to really go forward sensibly? It seems like over time, it just builds up mass that it would slow itself down because you have to consider everything that went before.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do. I can't speak for everybody else. I prefer to make sure that I keep, so the issue is that, yes, you have to go kind of before and kind of continuously revisit like how it started and what's happened throughout, and, where you're at now. But you have to be careful not to get into the weeds of a bunch of different branches of stuff. Like at the end of the day, if it's a divorce and there's children, the issues are who's the kid staying with, what is the possession schedule like, what's on the table as far as property and debt, and did one person or the other affect that property or debt to the detriment of the other person. And if you just kind of keep those things in mind, you can go through like the first half of the hearing, maybe, mom was just absolutely bashing on dad the entire time. Okay, well, I want to keep that in mind, but that doesn't necessarily affect the issues. That was more of an emotional reaction. So, I don't know if that makes any sense, but yes, I look back through the case to see where we're at here, because, behavior is typically, the future behavior is predicted by, historical behavior. So I do keep that in mind, but I try not to get hung up on too much of the little details that happened between the filing and where I've been.
Yeah, how do you stay out of the emotional side of it?
Well, luckily, it's not my personal life. So, I try to be empathetic and sympathetic, to people. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for making something on paper that helps these people for potential issues later and to just give them a fresh start. So I try to consider the fact that this is not my personal life. This is not something, at the end of this case, there will be another one. We're going to handle 120 people at the same time. They've all got stuff going on. I do not have the physical or emotional or mental energy to put myself in their seat for every single client. So, I try to keep the perspective sympathetic and empathetic without, it's like a switch. Like, okay, this isn't my personal life. This is their personal life. So the emotions are coming from them. We have to be a little bit objective.
Okay. I'm sure in some cases you really like the client. Maybe you thought they were the better of the two. And maybe in other cases, you felt like you had the not nicer of the two, the meaner of the two. What's it like to be the paralegal for both situations where, you really like the client, you're hoping for them, and then the other one where you're like, oh, they're fine, I gotta do my job.
Yeah. And it's funny. For me, it seems like the clients that I liked right at the beginning, I end up absolutely just not liking towards the end. Like, for whatever reason, I thought one thing or another at the beginning of it. And then as we get into their case, I find out like, no, this person is terrible. But it doesn't really matter how I feel regardless. It doesn't matter, what this person is like. There are guidelines. The family code has guidelines on how to do this and what to do. And at the end of the day, it's the judge's decision. So it's my job just to get all that information, to do what the attorney kind of wants. Because thankfully, I'm a paralegal, so I don't have to like them. I just have to protect my attorney's interests, and I have to do what protects his bar card. So he's going to have me draft something, and it really doesn't matter if the client is cool or if the client's a jerk. Everything is on paper. There's a procedure. There's something that I need to be doing, whether it's somebody that has a drug problem. I mean, I have to sometimes, it's the strategy that the attorney is going to deal with. Like, that's the part they're going to deal with. So for me, I may have a personal opinion about it, but it doesn't affect like what I write or how I, do what I need to do for the attorney to get their result.
Okay. Well, have you worked for the same firm for 16 years? It's just a freelance. So you've been to a bunch of firms. Okay. I was going to say, tell me about the bosses, the attorneys that you worked for. Which one, not names or anything, but which ones are good bosses and which ones are not, and why? Like, how does an attorney work well or not with a paralegal?
Okay, let's switch it, because I've gotten to work with some really, really great legal minds, and I've gotten to work with some really, really crazy people. Like, there are so many attorneys that you just wouldn't believe. I've worked for, I'm not going to say names, obviously. I've worked for some really good attorneys that are very hands-off. They're just like, I want this done, and then they walk away. I've had attorneys that are super micromanagey, and they stand behind you and while you're drafting a letter, and then all of a sudden, you have never seen a keyboard before. And I've had attorneys that yell and scream, throw stuff. I've had attorneys that had drug problems, drinking. Oh yeah. I've worked for some really, really interesting people. And so obviously the ones that are abusive are not the ones that you want to work for. But in some cases, honestly, depending on their level of expertise, it's worth taking the abuse for a little while just to learn the things that they have to teach you. Because I honestly don't think that I would be here where I am in my career if I hadn't worked for some of these people based off of their legal expertise and the things that they could teach me. But I would really have liked to not have to deal with doors slamming and working at 11 and having a screaming Mimi, through the office, telling everybody how terrible they are and how come you can't spell. And, oh, by the way, over here because you're the only one that knows what you're doing. There's a lot of on one end or the other. But I think if there's like any job, if there's some level of mutual respect, if there's some type of humanity there, I don't like passive aggressive personally. So it's good to have an attorney that's direct without being a jerk about it. If there's an issue, that the attorney wants to do something different, I think there is a certain amount of personality meshing that goes on there. But you're not friends, and in some cases they're your boss, and in some cases they're not your boss, but supporting them for the boss. So you don't want the abusive ones. You don't want the crazy stuff. You don't want I think that there are a lot of firms out there that do a lot of drinking lunches, maybe.
Drinking lunch, they used to call it a 3 martini lunch. That's probably paid.
Yeah, there are some firms that do that, and I get that they're kind of trying to build morale, and they're trying to, it's kind of a nice thing, but it's you maybe just stay away from that. That's my personal opinion after having worked for a couple of firms that have done that and some firms that haven't. And then the boss that just is very direct and says, this is what I want, and then not taking things personally. Because even now, I'm a good drafter, but there's a lot of attorneys that just have different preferences, and they'll revise something to within an inch of its life. You'll draft it and they'll say, okay, this is great. And then, they'll revise it and go, well, actually, what I really want to say is, or what, I don't know. And you're like, okay, well, 2 decrees ago, you said this was fine. So it's kind of rolling with the punches and understanding that your attorney is a human being and is typically preferential, and that it's a stressful field for everybody. But
yeah, what do you see what gets to the attorney, or what makes them emotional or upset or not functioning well? Is it if they lost the case, then they're going to be upset for a few days or a week, or is it just the ugliness of family law gets to them, or what do you think happens?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that there's a lot of pressure on them because they're the ones standing in front of the judge, in front of other people making this case. And if the client has bad facts, that's really tough on them because they're doing their very best to present this person in the most positive light they can. I have found that a lot of people in family law, what stresses them out the most is that people go into family law thinking that, number one, it's like Suits or something on TV. And they get these clients that you are working your butt off and you have done everything you could possibly do. You may have actually won them everything that they would never have gotten in their best day in court, and the client still isn't happy. Because at the end of the day, there is no winning and losing in family law. There just isn't. You can
compromise?
Yeah, it's what can you live with? What is it? And in many cases, it's what's in the best interest of children. And sometimes that's not necessarily the same thing as what's fair. And that's another thing I think that that gets to attorneys is that, they know what a win is in court, especially with certain judges. But the client doesn't ever usually feel like they've gotten their whole story out. A lot of people have regret after they go to mediation. They feel like, well, what if I had gone to trial? And so a lot of that, culminates, and it's a lot of pressure on the attorneys. The clients are in constant demand of communication. A lot of them really need hand holding. And now we have all of these AI things, which I'm seeing a big surge of people that are putting their case facts into ChatGPT. Yeah. And they're coming back to their attorneys and being like, hey, this is what I found on the internet. It's like, dude, you can't get your JD on Google, but this is what it is. And so the attorney kind of has to combat all of that stuff and go into court and present this thing. It's like speaking in public, you know what I mean? You got to go in front of all these people and do everything right. You have to look right. You have to act right. You've got to drive the fancy car because you don't look like you're a successful attorney. And it's a lot. And when they lose a case, yeah, I think it depends on the case, of course, but there are some cases where it feels like there's a real injustice that may be happening. And a lot of attorneys went into the field trying to make things better for people and to actually help people. And so when they don't do that to when they don't feel like they've gotten to that level, or they feel a lot of times that they've let themselves down or that they left their client down, I think that really affects them a lot.
Is there a lot of perfectionism in the field that you see?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of attorneys. And if there isn't, honestly, if the attorney isn't really concerned about, well, it's not perfect, then that tells me that, maybe they need a sabbatical. Maybe they need to find something else, because you kind of do have to be perfect. You have to do it for the image. You have to do it to get more clients in the door, but you also have to do it so that because every mistake can come back on you. You'd be surprised how many of them do.
So any examples you can give without too many details?
Yeah, I had one person many years ago that didn't put some language in there for like a real estate transfer. There's a certain clause in there that they should have put in, they didn't. And like after the ink was dry, like the judge had signed it, but certain things hadn't come to fruition, the person died. And then it became this huge issue of, okay, well, he was awarded this, but this language wasn't in there, so we can't transfer that property now. And it was like, what are we going to do? Because this person's died. Like, we're not getting a signature on a deed. We're not. So it's things like that that become real headache, 4 months afterwards, based on something that they really don't have any control of. So if you miss that clause, if you miss thinking about something that might happen, you have problems like that. There's a bunch of different situations. There's adoptions where people have had their rights terminated and then somebody adopted and they want to change the name on the birth certificate, but they didn't put the language in there properly for the adoption people of vital statistics. And people have had to go back to court and spend $3,500 just to get a little blurb in there that says vital statistics has to change the name. And that just to get something like that accomplished. So consequences can vary. But yeah, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, if you don't know what you're doing, or if you miss something, it can be a real problem.
What's it like dealing with all the local courts? Do they have I don't know if each judge is their own world unto themselves, or each court has, one court has this rule, one court has that rule. What's that like, navigating that stuff?
Oh, it's a pain. It would be really nice if everything was uniform. But that's not how any of this works. Different procedures. Some of them are like, you can do a letter to the court that says, hey, if they don't object in time, can you just sign this? And they're like, sure, no problem. There are some courts where you can do an electronic signature. There's some courts where you have to show up for absolutely everything. There's judges that will make stuff up that you're just like, where did you even get that? But they're the judge. So, you can do, go through your legal remedies if you want to, but it just kind of depends. And there are certain coordinators that you have to deal with to get scheduling done, and they've got their own rules, and you're like, what is happening? I just want to set a hearing. Like, why do I have to go through them? So it is different. What I really wish that we bring back in this area, during COVID, everything was electronic.
Yeah, that must have been, good and bad.
Yeah, and it was good and bad. And I get both sides of it, but at the same time, it's like, if we had just kind of built on that and kind of tweaked, the stuff that was difficult or the things that maybe we needed to work on, by now, I think we would have a pretty seamless procedure here as far as just getting everything done electronically. I think we kill less trees, but
So COVID showed a possible way to do things better and more streamlined, but a lot of places have fallen back, forgotten it.
And I don't really know why. Yeah, I feel like a lot of us during COVID were like, dude, this Zoom thing is awesome. Like, let's do that. Like, there are certain people that just need to have their day in court. They need to physically be there. There are certain things I get that maybe they physically need to be there. But for the most part, we have capabilities now that, I mean, there's so many tools out there that we could be using that I just feel like would make a lot of difference for people financially and for access to legal help as a whole. But for whatever reason, a lot of places have gone back to paper and physical hearings and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's get a little bit into the AI stuff. So you said clients, like Dr. Google, they used to call it, or, Attorney Google. So now they're using ChatGPT and they're calling up and saying, hey, ChatGPT says this, you said that, why? What's happening?
Yeah. Well, what I'm seeing a lot of is that they will, I don't know what they're prompting ChatGPT with, but whatever result is, they're copying and pasting it in emails. And it's like the other day we had somebody, it's a very simple order. The order of the court was super specific on certain things that I really wish they had been so specific on, but they weren't. So what do you want me to do? But this lady was, I mean, I don't think I even drafted it yet. And she had already sent me an email that was like, what I want to see in this order is, and there was just this like list of stuff, and it was like, where, she started to, it was like there's this enforceability thing, and then she's, it quotes like a family code that ChatGPT hallucinated. It's not even real.
Really?
Yeah. And then there's, they put in, or sometimes it'll shoot out a statute or something that wasn't, it doesn't apply to the case, even though you might think it would. So, that's kind of
Is there a way that y'all can preempt that? Like, let's say for every new client, let's say you're working with lawyer X and they're starting to see these problems. Have you ever said to them, look, let's right up front on the intake say, yes, people using ChatGPT and here's some of the problems with it. So if you use it and there's something in there that you think we're not doing, believe me, we're aware of it and blah, 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 blah. Like, is there any way that you can isolate against the effects of AI making people backseat drive you?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's kind of new, so it's kind of, I'm just now seeing this over the past maybe year of people really relying on ChatGPT during their litigation. So I mean, that's a good suggestion. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to combat it. Frankly, I don't know if telling them is going to do any good, because these are the same people that were popping the questions into Google. You know what I mean? They were backseat drivers to begin with. So now I just feel like they have something that they think is so much more accurate and so much, it's so much easier just to ask ChatGPT. But the problem is, and maybe telling them that ChatGPT is only as good as your questions. Like, and as you build, as you use ChatGPT, they kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's kind of like they build on the relationship they have with you, and they collect data as you continue your conversations with them. And so the result or whatever request that you're doing, they kind of tailor a little bit. I don't know how to explain that. It's still kind of new for me too, but I do see a lot of pro se people being like, "Hey, this is great. We'll put it. I need the court to move the hearing because I'm going to be somewhere," and they'll say, "ChatGPT, can you help me with that?" And then they'll pump out this terrible motion for continuance, and they'll file it. Which I'm not. The problem is I'm not really upset. Like, I get it. Like, if you're a person that just doesn't have a lot of money and you don't feel like you should have to do all of this, just to get a result that they think is easy, even if it's not,
Right.
to use the resources that you have available. Like, I'm not even mad at it. It's just difficult because it's like, man, this is BS. This isn't right.
Are you hearing complaints from the attorneys, or like, we've heard attorneys saying, I can't believe the judge did this, or oh, now judges are having to deal with ChatGPT and getting pissed, or like, what do you see in, with the people involved in the legal world? Again, other paralegals or judges or attorneys, what are they saying?
Most of them are kind of laughing at it, honestly, because some of the stuff that comes out is absolutely ridiculous and people rely on it. And it's pretty obvious when people use ChatGPT and pump out their motions. It's,
I heard some lawyers are doing it too. Yeah, they're caught. Great.
Some of them got caught. I think there was one in New York that ended up with like sanctions just because he used ChatGPT and none of the case law was right. It's not against AI. I'm not. I think that it's a good tool, but I think we have to really consider the fact that there still has to be some human oversight. Like, you can't just put it in there and have it, crap you out of motion and then that's going to fly. Like, I don't think that's what it's intended for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So what do you see as the near-term future of paralegalism? Anything dramatically changing in the field, or it seems steady for now?
I think it seems steady. I also think that as far as paralegals are going, I think a lot of paralegals are starting to notice that the attorneys that are kind of using us interchangeably as legal assistants and having us kind of do everything it's affecting the bottom dollar, but it's also kind of like, listen, I'm sorry, you can do, as an attorney, you can probably do all of this stuff, but you can probably only do all of this stuff for like 2 clients at a time. Like, there's no way you're going to build 120, 150 client, at a time practice without a good paralegal, without a paralegal that knows what they're doing, that is going to prepare you, is going to have everything ready for you to walk in. You just don't have that much time as an attorney. You just don't.
You want to be the surgeon in the room. Everything's ready for you. All the instruments laid out.
Right. And so I think a lot of paralegals are starting to realize, like, hey, at a point, like when you start knowing what you're doing and you really add value, it's kind of like, I need to be compensated for the value. I need you to understand that I don't have to work for you, that working for you is benefiting both of us. And I think a lot of paralegals are starting to understand that this is a more and more of a symbiotic relationship. I got a friend of mine named Jacqueline Foster. If you ever want to talk to her, she made a book called Paralegals Should Be Millionaires.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And it's along that same vein. She's basically identified like, hey, paralegals don't have to be stuck in the thing. Like, it's kind of one of the reasons why I ended up going into being freelance, because I'm like, I don't love dealing with the emotions. I don't really like the hand holding. There's certain things about working in a firm I don't like dealing with. But I really like drafting, and I really like coming up with solutions or helping somebody, really drive their point in court and creating emotion that's just like mind blowing. You know what I mean? I like doing those things. So now I'm at the point where I feel like I've been drafting long enough to kind of mitigate a lot of issues and make things a lot easier for attorneys, and less revisions and less time and all that kind of stuff. So I'm at the point now where I'm like, hey, I am valuable. And if you want to use my services, this is my rate. Let's do this. And then you just buckle down and you do the work. And attorneys are starting to, I think, maybe hopefully starting to use more freelancers, just because it affects the bottom line a little better. It's not a commitment. There's usually no like benefits, all the money you have to put in for somebody, and you just email them what you need and you get it back in a couple days.
So what, I asked this question one way, just a couple more questions, we'll be done, but everything's great so far. How should attorneys work with a paralegal so that they're going to be successful, and how should they not? Like, obviously, don't scream at them, don't have temper tantrums, that stuff. But what else can an attorney do to be a really great, symbiont with a paralegal so they work together well?
Just be very direct and tell them what you want as the end result, and give them the freedom to get there. Just stay in your lane, for one. That's, hate to say it that way, but you attorneys need to stay in your lane. Like, you guys do this and we do this, and that's how this works. Obviously, direct feedback. If there's certain things that they like and don't like, to be upfront about it, so that you can just do it the way they want it the first time, and you don't have any other issues that way. Trust and acknowledging to that paralegal that you trust them. Like, hey, I know this is what I want. This is what the client kind of needs. This is kind of what I think we probably need to do. And then if paralegal says, well, actually, and being open to that kind of conversation, and considering the perspective of the paralegal, instead of just being like, well, I want a counter petition and this is what I want in it. And then the paralegal says, well, I mean, you can do that, but what if we did this instead? Even if the attorney says, no, I don't want to do that, to at least be open enough to say, well, let's explore that. Let's look at that and see what would be good about that. What would be the benefit?
And be open-minded.
Yeah, being open-minded, being willing to communicate different ideas and accept potentials, and just trust your paralegal. Trust them that they're going to do what's in your best interest and ultimately what the client needs, and take their, I was a trial paralegal for a while, which I loved. And I remember sitting in trial, and while the attorney is doing their thing, they are very focused, and they've got, they're doing their thing. So I'm noticing certain physical behaviors between the person that he is cross-examining and the defendant. And I'm like, he comes over and kind of looks at me, and I said, ask her how long they've known each other. And it turns out that they've been dating for the past month and a half. You know what I mean? Like, she's not just some witness that came out of nowhere that just saw this thing that happened. This is a person that's personally and physically involved with the other person. So to take paralegal observations and the paralegal suggestion, I think that will make you more successful, instead of just, I know what I'm doing, you can be quiet now.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about attorneys overutilizing their paralegal, like thinking they could do everything, things they shouldn't be doing? Like in the beginning, you said intakes and, will be done by one person and drafting another. But do you have attorneys that want, a paralegal to do everything and it's too much?
Yeah, it is. It is too much. And actually, I think that's one of kind of the problems in the legal field. And I think that happens quite a bit. I think attorneys are like, well, I've got this person that can do everything, so let's just let them do everything. And it'll just be kind of part of their job description. And that's just going to be the expectation. I think it leads to burnout. I think that you're not utilizing your person. If you're going to have them doing all that stuff, they're not going to have the time to really focus on what their skills are lean towards or what they've been trained in. So you're going to miss out on a lot of that. And there's only so many things somebody can do in a day. You can't just keep piling things on somebody and expecting everything to run smoothly. That's when accidents happen. That's when things get missed.
Well, there are attorneys that are workaholics or just, close to it, and then they want their paralegal to be the same.
Yeah. And that, to a certain extent, I get that. If you're a team and you guys are just working hard and that's what you do, that's fine. But I think that there needs to be a little bit of, at some point, hey, the work is never going to stop. There's always going to be a case. This one of the problems that I do tell new paralegals is that there's never really a sense of accomplishment. There's not that you don't go home and you're like, all right, I did everything today. Well, it's all finished. That's not how it works. So there are attorneys that are really workaholics and they do that. And some of them are just building their careers. They're building their names. So to a certain extent, I can understand that. But if you're worth what you're doing, you should be able to say, hey, we need to set some boundaries here.
Okay. Any other advice for young paralegals on what to do or not do?
Oh, Lord. Yeah, like a book worth.
Well, that'd be your book. Your friend did one, then you got to do one, yeah?
Well, yeah, maybe. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know. If it's somebody that, I think what's really important is finding an attorney that really cares. There's a lot of attorneys that, that they cared at one point and then they get to, the point in their career where they're like, I'm just going to coast. And that kind of...
They get jaded, I guess. They're tired.
Yeah. And it's understandable, but it kind of sucks because it's there's nothing, you just don't feel like you're helping. But I guess that's probably more like a middle to experienced paralegal as far as being a youngin'. And learn from your mistake. Don't beat yourself up too bad about them. Try not to repeat them. Be direct about, what you need. Some attorneys' minds work really freaking fast. And sometimes they forget that you need a little more detail sometimes. But above all, you are the most important resource. So you need to do the work. You need to exhaust all of your resources before you go ask attorneys a question about something. And that's something I'm seeing a lot less of with the newer paralegals that are coming up, is that they're very much like, well, how do I do that? Well, I have a question about this. And it's kind of like, okay, but did you try to figure it out first? So that's a big one. And then don't take things personally. If your attorney sends back something with revisions, they don't think you're dumb. It just changes their mind about how they want something written. It's not fine. Just do what they want and send it back.
All right. So what areas do you serve? You're in Texas, but which metro do you work in, or do you work all over?
Yeah, I do. I work all over Texas. I've been in Dallas-Fort Worth area and Johnson County, but I freelance for attorneys in East Texas, El Paso, Austin, whoever needs me.
Okay. Well, very good. And what's the best way for people interested, if they want paralegal services to contact you? Where can they go?
Yeah, they can go to my website. It's www.freelanceannieparalegal.com, and they can email me too.
And that's on the website?
2 emails. Yeah, that's on the website too. So they can just search me up that way, or they can hit me up on LinkedIn. I don't have a lot of social media anymore. I kind of got tired of the doom scrolling, so you're lonely.
Good for you. Excellent. Well, Annie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I learned a lot by talking to you, and it was really great. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.